Welcome to Scene, where the art world meets the real world. Every 2 weeks, we sit down with emerging and established artists to offer a genuine glimpse into their lives and minds, all in an authentic and totally straightforward manner. I'm Carrie Scott, your host. And with 2 decades of experience as a curator and art historian, I firmly believe in the transformative power of art, if it's seen. I think it's safe to say that Syd Carpenter is having a moment. Though in truth, this moment has been happening for more than 50 years, or it's been 50 years in the making. Carpenter is a seminal figure in American ceramics, a sculptor whose work has consistently expanded what clay can hold: materiality, history, emotion. And across a career that spans these 5 decades, she's used ceramics to think deeply about African American history, land and agriculture, labor, memory, and the human body. This January, she's got a major retrospective at the Woodmere Art Museum in Philadelphia. She's also got 2 additional exhibitions running, one at the Berman Museum of Art, and the other at the Francis M. McGuire Art Museum. So when I say she's having a moment, I mean it. This woman is kind of everywhere right now. And together, I think these exhibitions kind of affirm what many have long known, that Syd Carpenter's work doesn't simply contribute to the field of ceramics, but it speaks to contemporary art, and it is reshaping where ceramics sits in that bigger dialogue. So I am delighted to have Syd Carpenter to the podcast today. Hello.
Hello, Carrie. Thank you for uh, providing this opportunity to talk about my work, yes, and to talk about my moment. I'm feeling very, very, if you will, blessed, if I can use that word, and the opportunity to just let people know about what I've been doing over such a long period of time. I mean, that's what's astonishing to me is that my momentum has just been sustained over these decades, and I get to look back at all of this work and also to look forward to work that I'm doing now and just feeling, wow, this is extraordinary for me, certainly. So, yes, I am having that moment that all artists look forward to.
Does it feel like a long time? I said in passing to my dad the other day, I said to him, I was like, life is long if you're lucky. And it was like one of those throwaway comments that I then thought,
Hmm.
actually, like, it's so true. Life is long if you're lucky. But do you feel
Hmm.
like, those 50 years have been a slog? Do you feel like it's been a long time coming, or has it just always been kind of unfolding and you've just been living that truth?
It's been amazingly, um, it's moved very quickly. When I have to tell you that when I hear the word 50 years, I kind of cringe because that's a lifetime, and I feel as if I'm just hitting my stride, and I think of that as, "Wait a minute, people are referring to me with this past already," and I'm feeling like there's so much more that I wanna do, and, there's this ignition switch that I hit a long time ago, and it's been sustained. It's, the whole idea of working for 50 years, it's gone in a flash. It's moved in a flash, and so going into these exhibitions that have been, um, put up in these museums, I can see that has been this lifetime of work, but it feels like, "Oh, wow, I did that, I did that, I did that. When did I do that? And who was that did that?" It's all of that disbelief about how, well, yeah, life just continues. And I feel as if, the momentum in my life has been sustained by luck, by support from other people. just living in fairly turbulent times, but very, very fruitful times for me. So the 50 years is an abstraction.
I wanna start at the beginning, like, I want you to sort of, tell me really how you came to ceramics and, I read that you said that you don't think you become an artist, that you're kind of born an artist, and I wanna talk about that. But briefly, I think it's impossible to get into any of this without talking about the fact that, you know, um, this is, frustratingly a story that happens a lot to women, right? That their careers for most of their lives are running along nicely, but they don't get the kind of recognition that they deserve. Um, and indeed that ceramics has kind of been sidelined. So I guess I wanna ask you 2 things here, like, do you feel at all a sense of vindication that, like, ceramics is finally receiving overdue attention and you are too? Or again, are you just like, "This is life. This is the life I led. It's all good."
Probably I could agree to both of those assessments. Sure. For so many women, a lot of their obscurity has to do with their gender and what was seen as important and who was important and who got to do what. Those are real. I can't deny that. Those are documented, real experiences, and there are countless stories that women can tell that attest to how they were overlooked. I, as an African American woman, assume I'm going to be overlooked. So that was, that's a given. So to the extent that I'm going to dwell on that while I'm making things and feel as if woe is me, I just have to get on with it. And that's what I did with the assumption, of course I'm on the margin. Look at my my bio, if you will. So um I assume that I'm working in clay, I'm an African American woman. Um there's just going to we're at a time when these gender issues, when I started out I was in the 70s, and the women's movement, the civil rights movement, all of these things are going on. And so I can uh, go under the bus, so to speak, if I let that be the motivating force. So I did say that artists are born. So there's my advantage. I'm there. I am an artist, and I know that the impulses, the things that I are drawn to, those are going to be the fuel for my making. Now, I'm not saying that I uh, knew what to do. I was certainly confused, but I knew that was the path I was going to take. I mean, I had the option to be a medical doctor. I was given the option to go to University of Pennsylvania as a pre-med student, which it was never a consideration. Well, it was a consideration, probably for my family and my mother especially, to have a child, a woman child, the times we were living in, what was needed. We certainly needed Black doctors and we certainly needed women doctors at the time. But fortunately for me, my mother was an artist in her soul. And I was clearly going to be, or at least I had the attributes of an artist. And so she did not in any way express any kind of strong leaning toward you have to be a doctor. She allowed me and I allowed myself to know that who I was an artist, and that's where I was going to go. And so that was pretty amazing at that time. And so I followed through with that. Um, I knew what was inside of me. I knew what my impulses were. I knew what I was inclined to to do in terms of just how was I going to spend my days. I think I was wise enough at that time to think about, well, there's the prestige of being a medical doctor, but then how does a medical doctor spend their day? Well, they spend their days spending time with people at their worst moment, their saddest moment, their most vulnerable moment. Or I could spend my days looking at things, making things, creating things, and addressing what our a viewer or a public or someone who needs to see imaginative things. And my job would be to provide that outlet, and for myself and for the culture. I was smart enough at that time to make that comparison and decide that's how I wanted to spend my days, making art.
So then you go to school for art? Did you go and study? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I instead of going to University of Pennsylvania, I went to Tyler School of Art where I was able to study ceramics with Rudolf Staffel, who was this very, very important person in my life only because he, unlike many uh, other places where I worked or studied, he didn't look at me as a woman, as an African American woman. He just looked at me as a person who was going to make art, and he provided that space, that welcoming, instructive place for me to become an artist. And so that was important. So Rudolph Staffel, Tyler School of Art, those were, that was my incubator.
And how ceramics? Like, how did you land in that medium?
You mean why ceramics as opposed to something else?
Yeah.
I came to art school to be a painter
Did you?
because that was, yeah, I was going to be a painter because that's what art was. Art was painting, um, like very, very figuratively with a lot of technical, um, just technical ability to making art that looked like the European masters. That was art. That's where you got most of your affirmation and who was a famous artist who at the time I didn't even know about African American artists because nobody was presenting them to me. No one there was no I didn't know that I had this history um uh of extending uh making art as an African American in this country as a woman. I didn't know that. That was something I had to teach myself. In other words, there were no mentors. Um, Rudolph Staffel was there as a conduit, as a providing space. But it was just one of those things where, given that space, given that time, given that freedom, I was able to make all the mistakes, do all the things without serious consequence, which is important. I did make my living teaching. I started teaching right away in arts centers and finally in colleges. So it was my husband, of course, I met him there, Steve Donegan, at, at Tyler School of Art, and we were able to cobble together a decent living that allowed us to travel, that allowed us to um, work with other artists, do projects. And so it was, I would get grants, which was really, really, of course, important. So support from my city, support from um, the state, yeah, national grants, things like that. So I was able to just move through um, on stepping stones that came from being an artist. And so uh, which has brought me to this, and I didn't have any major interruptions in my ability to make art. Of course, I had family, and I had to work with them as their lives developed because I was always very much involved with my family, and so that it, I was working simultaneously as an artist, as a teacher, as a family member, and all of that stuff was fortunately um, the complications were not those that would prevent me from working with my material.
What so complications, it's interesting to me that you've just raised that there were complications because when I look at the work, uh, as a whole from afar, right? Because I'm looking at, um, images that have been sent through. It it has this, wonderfully well, your forms are kind of they're made up, they're assemblages almost, right? And they combine all sorts of things in them, and they are complicated and, uh, without a sort of expected narrative. Um, can you talk about kind of what elements you're bringing into the work time and time again? Like, how do these kind of unexpected forms come to be? Is it from mistakes and complications and life?
See, that's that wonderful question about where does it come and who's in there with you. And when I say in there, he in there. Who's in there with me facilitating this? Because if I look at the pieces, I can honestly say I don't know how they got. And so what is that? Um, I'm starting with a material. I have certain skills. I know how to move this material around. And then there comes when, well, what are you making? What are you reacting to? And I know that I'm very much interested in organic forms and in uh, just nature, of course, and my history, of course. All of these things are playing into that are in the studio. They're in the air. Um, I'm not particularly. I didn't look for a style. I wasn't modeling the work after anyone. I couldn't say even though I mentioned Rudolf Stapel, I wasn't interested in making work that reflected his influence, as an artist. So I knew that there were just certain things that appealed to me about the medium, its plasticity, its strength, and of course its challenge because you do not force clay to do anything. You collaborate. It will tell you if it's going to respond positively to your suggestion. Because when I would start making, um, and I would be thinking about a form, I would have to negotiate it because I was basically training myself when I was no longer a painter and started working in clay. I had to learn these processes, which were very, very basic. Um, Coil building, slab building, working on the wheel, press molding, all those kind of basic things that you learn, and how to adapt them to making shapes that were, to me, of interest, not reflections of the traditions of ceramics, because I was definitely couldn't be considered someone who followed clay traditions. I used clay Oh, the material, I used the processes that were basic, but always in reaction to the things that I noticed. And there's this phrase that I learned uh, that said, notice what you notice. And that was important. Um, the idea of, oh, yes, what I noticed also is just as important as what somebody else notices and puts into their art. And so I've always taught that phrase. And so the shapes themselves were coming out of reactions to the garden. And then, of course, once you have an accumulation of shapes, you begin to see how they talk to each other. And I was interested in getting to them to reflect a muscularity, flexibility, movement. Those are all words that I was interested in. And the garden itself teaches you that that's happening quietly, silently, but very, very actively. And so my intention was to bring that kind of vitality into these forms. So to make um, vine-like forms, to make animated, hybridized forms. Um, and then it was always about movement. I never wanted anything to sit flat on the surface. Um, there was a period there in the 80s and 90s where everything had to only touch down as infrequently as possible, but still support its own weight. So that so there were a lot of spirals and things that had pointed tips that they would just, you'd have a 50-pound object that was resting on a few points. So the engineering part of it was also vital. So I like challenging myself with this material and have it survive and communicate this sense of um flesh, movement, and also uh with this sense that what you were seeing was only temporary because this object had the capacity to move. And that if you looked away and then looked back, it had changed configuration. And so the other important thing was to make things that you could not understand from one perspective. It was necessary for you to move. The object was moving, and you have to move with it. So those were the criteria for these forms: is movement, something that was temporary in its configuration, surface texture, something that had a sense of not being something that looked transparent, even though it was solid clay, because clay conveys these very, very solid, um, stable. It talks about stability. It has to be, because if you don't make it stable, it's going to break. And so I would actively go after instability, or at least the suggestion of the same, and transparency and movement, all of these kinds of things in a material that was not necessarily associated with those
I
attributes.
I love this idea that you do. The work most certainly sort of demands that the viewer move around it to understand it, and, like, pieces, um, there's distinct, like, sort of ways round, vessels or sculptures, um, and that makes me think of sort of the way we navigate space outside and gardens. And as a kid, my grandmother had this, like, epic, I mean, just it was a tiny, tiny, tiny garden, but, I mean, probably, like, 8 feet by 10 feet, but to me, it felt like a secret garden, and she had this path through it that she was dictating how we'd get, um, to encounter things, right? Whether it was the rose bush that was growing up something or the sweet peas crawling up. And when I look at your work, that garden part, came to me immediately, and then I started reading about your work more generally, and gardens run through your work time and time again. Your grandmother's, victory garden, right? Your mother's, um,
Mhm. Yeah,
flowers,
in
and
Pittsburgh, yeah.
now, um, yeah, it seems to have come up time and time again. What is that relationship for you like?
Well, it's essential right now. You're born an artist. I feel like I was born a gardener. That it came to me as I bought my first and only house. I still own my and and occupy my first house, which I love. And the reason why is because it is surrounded by a garden that has different rooms through it. It's not huge. It's about 100 feet long by maybe 30 feet across, and it surrounds my um, late 19th century Victorian house. And I can see the garden from all sides. And so I often find myself looking out the windows and planning it and um, thinking about the colors and shapes and the projects I'm going to do in it. The same way that when I walk into the studio and I sit there with my cup of tea and think about where this next piece needs to go or figure out a problem or issue that I need to resolve. So both of those places are sites of um, my creative energy so the garden is real critical to that. I mean, right now it's winter time and I've already started assembling the plants and the ideas and the colors for that. And so it's just I feel very lucky that I have these impulses that feed my intellect, my compulsiveness, because there's a lot of compulsiveness in being an artist and a gardener. You have to be willing be uh, to go off track. You need to go off track to find the next step. So the garden changes every year. My work just, you know, keeps moving in directions. I don't try to repeat myself because I don't know how to repeat myself. I can't I start something, I have to invent it every single took. I don't know how to make it. So, yeah, and answer to your question about the garden is just this essential location for my making impulse.
And it most definitely there's motifs from the garden that come up in your work kind of time and time again, and I love this idea that you're, um, both clay and, gardening, right? You're at the whim of the material and what it's gonna do to like, it pushes back on you as much as you want to control and push on it. So I think there's a real you obviously embrace that, um, flexibility. What, uh let's talk about clay again for a second, just because of how, you know, uh, it's often sort of well, in the fine art hierarchy, clay is way at the bottom. We can talk about whether that's a good thing or not. I would argue it's not, and it's ridiculous, but it's often described as kind of, uh, well, it's humble, utilitarian, craft sometimes. Um, what do you think that it allows you to say, particularly about your sort of African American history, um, that maybe another medium wouldn't?
Well, let's see. Um, the question speaks to because I'm an African American woman, do I have a special relationship to this material? Well, of course, there are the traditions coming out of Africa. The greatest uh, potters that I can think of, Magdalene Odundo, Lottie Kwali, and there are numerous others that I could think name where that is clearly the gift that they bring to not only our own culture, but to the world. The uniqueness and the incredible facility and um, connection that bring them to this material. Um, do I have that feeling that because I'm African American and a woman, that I have some special connection to clay? That would be pretty arrogant of me. I don't think so. I mean, I had to move towards this material and be humbled by it like everybody else. And so the exoticism that would be associated with this, which is kind of cliche, I'm not having it. Just give me the opportunity to be a person who comes to this material, but I have no special connection because of my ethnicity or gender. And that's a kind of annoying association. Just because y- you're an African American woman, do you have some special connection to the earth? No. It's just I'm just a person. I don't have any exotic spiritual connections to the earth. I come to it, it's there, it's a resource. I am surely of the earth, aren't we all? We depend upon it, aren't we all? So those kinds of connections I poop with. If Magdalene Odundo has this at her background, she has this um history. Um she has this, but she came to it as a designer. She wasn't going to UK to be a potter. But she certainly found those connections. Lottie Polly, she was there. That's what women did. Some women did in Nigeria at the time. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I was fortunate enough to go to Tyler School of Art, meet Rudy Staple, and fall in love with the material like everybody
I
else.
heard, well, I was having a conversation with someone about Louise Bourgeois' work, and it happened to be a man.
Mhm.
Not that I think this matters in this context, but it was an interesting thing that he said to me, and he just said, "Well, she used the material that was around her because she was a a woman, and so cloth was part of her domestic sphere." And I was like, um "What do you know about Louise Bourgeois?" And he was like, "Why?" And I said, "Well, just because she's a woman doesn't mean she had access to cloth any more than a man might have, right?" And indeed, she grew up her parents were,
Right.
um, textile people. She grew up, they ran a textile mill, and so her relationship with cloth was there from the start. Um, but I thought it was interesting, and that's kind of why I raised the question to you. Um, just that we make a series of assumptions, about mediums that that we get, or the artists do things with mediums, um, that that aren't. Oh, I don't even know how to say it right, but yeah, that I think you've said it more poetically than I have, or much more plainly than I have. That it's y- this is a medium that you've used in spite of, um, or not even in spite of, kind of because you have to, right? That it is your it's your language now, kind of. I don't know if that's made any sense.
Also, right now, I use very little clay. I use metal, steel, found objects. So I began to be known as a clay artist, but if you're looking at what I do now, you'd be hard pressed to find the clay in it, even though it's there. So once again, it's Syd Carpenter, clay artist, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe not for now, because I'm making things, and as I progress, I include um even more materials into it because you have to understand it's about the ideas. It's not about the material. Feel no necessity. There's no need for me to start everything with clay now. I am starting things with printmaking right now. Um, I'm not a technically my printmaking skills and expertise are very limited. Um, but I'm managing to invent and to adapt paper, and I have a rickety old printing press, and I use digital printing. Um, so just not to belabor that point, um, I reserve the right to make whatever I want to make. And no matter who, if I disappear from the radar of magazines and because I'm not making clay, no problem, because I have to pursue my ideas. And so if I want to be dismissed because, oh, she's not making clay anymore, so be it. So it's always going to be about the ideas. And I don't always locate my ideas in clay processes or clay surfaces or any of that.
What are those ideas? Like, when you look back at your project as a whole now, what do you think it's all been about? Is that even easy to summarize?
What's it all been about? um, don't know. Don't know what it's all been about. I mean, that would mean what would require me to define myself. Um, I know that as an artist, it's been important to me to find something true, true and authentic to what I have noticed about being in the world and how I have attempted to create objects that reflect my take on that wonderful, wonderful opportunity to celebrate being on this beautiful planet and seeing the amazing, stunning, um, unfathomably complex things that are here and then I can look at and visit. And so maybe that's what it's been about, is just reacting to it. Um, I'm not trying to imitate it, but I want my presence, my sense of being on this planet as a woman, as a just part of this whole huge, amazing experience. As it's just my environment. It's where I that's what I operate in. So there's no mandate to any of this other than to keep reacting and observing and hopefully making things that uh, create a location for other people to
Hmm.
view it and wonder about.
It's one of the things that I I think is special about your practice is this ability to talk about really deeply personal things as well as, kind of, things that resonate with all of us. Um, and it's the question I ask myself a lot with artists, like, as in, I ask of the work when I'm looking at something and I think, "God, this is obviously really personal, but it strikes a chord with me." Do you think that like, anchoring your works in nature on occasion helps you do that? Like, talk about the personal but the universal?
Well, you always are. Um, it's interesting about making art. It is as revealing um, when it is revealing as little as you say. If the less you say, the more revealing it is. Trying to get that sentence right. So, um, to be able to make things and have it be reflective of you, I'm. It's not about trying to tell who I am, because if you are at all visually perceptive, you're going to start to read the signals, because um, form is language. I think about my shapes as words, and I'm trying to be um, to communicate as gracefully and sensitively as I can using those words. And I don't feel like as if I have to be didactic or in any way um, revealing so much in an obvious way. I just think as I get older, my use of visual language, if I'm lucky, is getting more clear with maybe less, maybe not. I don't know. It depends, but I know that I'm speaking my language, and I am hopefully becoming more fluid in that language, and that others, folks, viewers, artists are able to pick up the signals and connect.
I just love this idea that you're just getting going, and I definitely, having just spoken to you for a short while, feel like that must be the case. Um, what just practically speaking, I heard about these 3 shows and thought, "Oh my gosh, like, that's a huge undertaking." Um, I for any, like, any of us, right? Launching one exhibition is a ton. Having 3 on is massive. Has it felt that way to you? Like, do you feel pulled in 3 parts, or is it, yeah, what's the experience like having 3 shows on in 3 different places?
Well, it it's intimidating, of course, and then it's exhilarating. And because I have such good support and the people working with me on these at the 3 museums, um, Bill Valario at the Woodmere, Lauren McCardle at Berman, Jean Bracy at the McGuire. These folks have been just amazing in their ability to coordinate and accommodate and recognize the importance of making this as good as it can be. Fortunately, I have enough work that I feel strongly about, that I want to be seen. And so that has been just the greatest part of this, is to be able to have enough material to make these 3 things happen. And each show is distinct from the other in what it's trying to convey. So the um, show at the Woodmere shows more earlier work that I am when I see it, I feel as if I'm a viewer because I it's from the 80s and 90s, and I'm thinking, who was that? Who made that? And how did that person do that? So I feel very delighted to be a viewer of my own work and just get to wonder about it. And then the second show, which is at the McGuire, I was able to curate that show by inviting women who I had come up with. We were out of the gate at the same time back in the 70s. And I just feel so great to bring them together with me in a show called Reunion. And these women are just amazing in how they have developed. And so I feel very proud that that show is happening, and I have a lot of my work obviously in it. And then when you go up to the Berman, it's mostly new work, all of the mixed media stuff, installation work. Um, and so that's amazing. I should say also simultaneously, there's an exhibition at the Renwick in DC that has also a major piece that I put in. So that's happening simultaneously too. So there are actually 4 shows that are going on that focus on me as an artist. And the one at the Renwick is a group show on farms and on fairs, state fairs, and so my work has been included, as an example of African American agricultural history, in that. So it's been exhilarating, and I don't feel overwhelmed by it. My husband has been very supportive in talking me down on any potential ledges that I might position myself on, so I'm good. And so I think support is it, and getting to just feel good about each show as each one opened, and they've all opened, um, just to look at it and feel and let's put it this way, to look at them and not cringe and not feel as if, "Uh-oh, I'm being exposed." Um,
Well,
so, doesn't matter,
from
it's great.
from afar, it just reads like a master class in discovery, um, right? Like, just to be able to kind of immerse oneself, and I'm over on the East Coast of the States in February, and I'm gonna try and come down actually, from New York to see, but, like, I just love the idea that you can drive around and get to know your work in depth kind of all at once, so bit of a master class. Lucky us.
Yeah, it's amazing, and then there's the catalog that was produced, which really did an excellent job. I hope you'll get a chance to see it, and, it just documents the whole thing. It has the sense of all of these layers of experience and time and people. Lowry Sims and Leslie King Hammond and, um, all the writers. Uh, it's just one of those things I didn't have to say it. They interpreted it and said it. So, I have had opportunities and will have more to talk about all of this. But I'm feeling as if the support surrounding this has been a personal phenomena. Just how did that happen? Just this is so good that I get to do this at this time in my life. The only sad thing is I was a child of Brown versus the Board of Education. I was born 1 year after that. And the trajectory has been towards, I think, um, all good for African American people, this moving forward, progress. So the irony is that here I am having this wonderful experience and my work has developed and it's out there only to find that I'm in a time of despair for our country. And so the irony of that is just sits on me um, heavily that after all of that, and now this is, I have my retrospectives in this phenomenal form, and this is what it has come to. So there's that kind of irony and a little bit of sadness.
Mm.
But I feel like it's going to move forward because I'm going to keep making work and this situation is going to evolve one way or the other. And so I'm just in it for the ride right now. I'm doing my work and supporting people and efforts as much as I can. And so life goes on.
And I mean, almost full circle to where we started. I feel like your story, I don't wanna be as trite as this, but, like, it gave when I was, reading the press release, I was like, "This is exactly what I need right now."
Mm.
You wanna get lost in your story, kind of not where we find ourselves, uh, with media at the moment, um and I think art is exactly where I wanna be. I wanna just be submerged in it, so being able to go and see these 3 shows, 4 shows, um, and learn about yeah, your path is just it's a gift, really, so thank you for that, and thank you for joining us. I haven't gotten through my 10 questions at all. Um, I'll blame it on my vague cold, but, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for continuing to dedicate, yourself, to your practice and your project. We're lucky that you do.
No, no, this is an honor for me. Like I said, I feel blessed that this is the path that I have taken and that there's is people who are willing to assist me with it and uh keep me, keep the energy up and that's what it takes. Just one day at a time, but that's the way I see it.
Well, thank you so much, and see you maybe in person soon.
Yes. Okay. Hope you get better. You feel better.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Scene Podcast. If you liked what you heard, I'd love it if you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to connect with us between episodes, follow us on Instagram at WatchSceneArt. I'm Carrie Scott, and I'll see you next time. Get it?